I've always believed in the inherent fairness of honest competition, in the simple, unadorned truth that hard work, dedication, and genuine talent should and usually do pave the path to success. My daughter Emma, at 16, was the living embodiment of that belief. She possessed a spirit that burned with a quiet but inextinguishable passion for her chosen sport, basketball. It wasn't just a hobby for her. It was an integral part of her being, a language through which she expressed her strength, her agility, her fierce competitive joy. She had trained relentlessly, almost obsessively, every single day for years, pushing her young body and her determined mind far beyond what I, as her mother, sometimes thought were her limits, all for the singular, all-consuming dream of making the varsity basketball team at Northwood High. But when the tryout results were finally unceremoniously posted, a single sheet of paper that held the weight of her entire world, I was stunned into a horrified, disbelieving silence. Emma, my hard-working, talented, utterly deserving Emma, was left out. Her name was conspicuously, cruelly absent from the list. And what shocked me even more, what ignited a cold, furious fire in my own maternal heart, was discovering the insidious, underhanded reason: petty, corrosive jealousy. One of the other girls, a player of far lesser skill but significantly greater social connection to the team's influential coach, I would soon uncover the real manipulative reason Emma's dream had been so callously, so unjustly shattered. I wouldn't let this blatant injustice slide. I knew with every fiber of my being that my daughter deserved a fair chance, a level playing field. And I wasn't going to let some petty high school politics, some underhanded maneuvering fueled by envy, ruin her future, extinguish her passionate flame. I was about to take a stand, to step into an arena I had never anticipated entering, and fight for the justice she so profoundly, so undeniably deserved. The fight for Emma's rightful place on that team was about to get fierce, and no one, absolutely no one, was going to stop me. My name is Carla Sanchez, and for as long as I can remember, my daughter Emma has lived and breathed basketball. It started innocuously enough, as these things often do. From the moment she first picked up a worn, slightly deflated basketball at the tender age of 5 in our neighborhood park, her small hands struggling to even grip its circumference, there was an undeniable spark, a natural, joyful affinity for the rhythm of the dribble, the satisfying swish of the net. Even if in those early days it was more often the thud of the ball against the backboard, it was clear even then to anyone who watched her play with such unbridled, infectious enthusiasm that she was destined to be an athlete, a competitor. But Emma wasn't one of those rare, prodigiously gifted children born with an almost supernatural, effortless talent. No, her considerable skill was forged not just in the crucible of natural aptitude, but far more significantly in the relentless, often grueling fires of unwavering hard work, unshakable dedication, and an almost monastic discipline that was truly remarkable for someone so young. She practiced every single day without fail, rain or shine, exhaustion or elation. Our driveway became her personal training ground, the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the basketball, a constant, familiar soundtrack to our suburban lives. She would be out there before school, perfecting her free throws as the sun cast its first golden rays over the dew-kissed lawn. She would rush home after school homework, hastily completed, to spend hours running drills, refining her crossover dribble, until it was a blur of controlled motion, practicing her jump shot from every conceivable angle on the court. Her young face a mask of intense concentration, her body moving with an increasing grace and power. She pushed herself always to her absolute limit, and then somehow found the strength to push just a little bit further. There were scraped knees, twisted ankles, bruised egos from playground pickup games with older, bigger boys who initially underestimated her. There were tears of frustration when a new move wouldn't quite click, when a shot stubbornly refused to fall. But through it all, her passion, her determination, never wavered. It only seemed to burn brighter, fiercer. As her mother, I was of course her staunchest, most vocal supporter. I became an expert at deciphering the arcane rules of basketball, at understanding the nuances of offensive plays and defensive strategies. Our weekends were often spent driving her to and from local league games to specialized training clinics to summer basketball camps. I cheered myself hoarse from the sidelines, my heart swelling with pride at her every skillful pass, her every tenacious rebound, her every perfectly executed shot. I learned to cook a repertoire of high-protein energy-boosting meals to ensure her growing athletic body was properly fueled. Our conversations were often peppered with discussions of NBA legends, of dream college teams, of her own ambitious aspirations. Her love for the game was infectious, and our shared journey through her burgeoning basketball career became a precious, deeply cherished bonding experience for us both. Over the months and years of this relentless, dedicated training, Emma's skills improved dramatically, almost astonishingly. She grew taller, stronger, faster. Her ball handling became a mesmerizing display of artistry and control. Her court vision, her ability to anticipate plays to read the game, became remarkably astute. She was no longer just a passionate kid playing a game. She was transforming into a genuinely formidable young athlete, a player with undeniable talent, an unshakable dedication, and a fierce, almost unquenchable determination to succeed. The Northwood High School varsity basketball team tryouts, scheduled for the beginning of her sophomore year, became the singular, all-consuming focus of her existence. This wasn't just another team. This was the team, the pinnacle of high school athletic achievement in our sports-obsessed town. Making varsity as a sophomore was a significant accomplishment, a testament to exceptional talent and hard work. Emma had worked towards this specific moment for so long, had poured so much of herself into preparing for it, that the anticipation, the excitement, the sheer, unadulterated hope was almost a physical presence in our home. She studied tapes of the previous year's varsity games. She meticulously analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of the current players. She ran extra sprints, did extra drills, her dedication, unwavering, her focus, absolute. She believed with every fiber of her being that her talent, her hard work, her undeniable passion for the game would be more than enough to secure her a coveted spot on that team, a spot she had dreamed of and diligently worked for what felt like her entire young life. Complicating the landscape, however, or at least adding a subtle undercurrent of unease that I as a mother had begun to quietly register, was the presence of another aspiring player, Lily Morgan. Lily was a classmate of Emma's, a girl who also played basketball, though with noticeably less dedication, and in my admittedly biased but also reasonably objective opinion, a significantly less developed skill set. Lily, however, possessed an advantage that Emma did not: a very close, very public, and very influential connection to the varsity team's head coach, a Mr. David Miller. Coach Miller, a man whose reputation in the community was more for his team's occasional winning streaks than for his unimpeachable fairness, was a longtime, close personal friend of Lily's father, a wealthy local businessman who was also, coincidentally, a very generous and very visible donor to the Northwood High Athletics program, and specifically to the basketball team's booster club. This special relationship between the Morgan family and Coach Miller was common knowledge, a source of occasional grumbling among other parents, but generally accepted as just the way things were in the often murky world of high school sports politics. I had noticed on more than one occasion during the informal summer league games and the pre-tryout conditioning sessions subtle but undeniable signs of Coach Miller's favoritism towards Lily. He would offer her more personalized coaching praise, her mediocre efforts, with an enthusiasm he rarely displayed for other more talented players, and often seemingly inadvertently overlook her more obvious mistakes or her less than stellar attitude during drills. Lily herself, perhaps emboldened by this perceived impunity, carried herself with an air of unearned confidence, a subtle but persistent cue-now arrogance that often grated on her teammates, including Emma. There were instances, small but telling, of Lily making snide under-her-breath comments about Emma's intensity during practice. "She tries way too hard, don't you think?" Or of her accidentally fouling Emma a little too aggressively during scrimmages, a sly, triumphant little smirk playing on her lips afterwards. Emma, to her credit, usually just shrugged these incidents off her focus, remaining steadfastly on her own game, on her own improvement. But I, watching from the sidelines, felt a growing maternal sense of disquiet. The playing field, I was beginning to suspect, might not be entirely level. Little did I know then just how uneven and how treacherously tilted it was about to become. The week of the Northwood High varsity basketball tryouts arrived with a palpable buzz of nervous excitement and fierce underlying tension that permeated not just our household, but seemingly the entire student body. For aspiring athletes like Emma, this was it. The culmination of years of dedication, the moment of truth, the gateway to their dreams. The tryouts themselves were a grueling multi-day affair, a series of intense drills demanding conditioning tests and high-pressure scrimmage games, all under the watchful appraising eyes of Coach Miller and his 2 assistant coaches. Emma, throughout the entire arduous process, was a portrait of focused determination. She arrived early for every session, meticulously warmed up, listened intently to every instruction, and gave absolutely everything she had on the court. Her performance, even to my admittedly biased maternal eyes, was nothing short of stellar. Her dribbling was a blur of controlled motion, her passes crisp and accurate, her defensive intensity relentless. In the scrimmage games, she consistently outplayed many of her peers, including, quite noticeably, Lily Morgan. Emma moved with a fluid grace, her court vision exceptional, her shots more often than not finding the satisfying swish of the net. She showcased not just her individual skills, but also her ability to be a smart, unselfish team player, making incisive passes, setting effective screens, communicating clearly on defense. I watched from the bleachers, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride, anxiety, and a deep, profound admiration for my daughter's unwavering commitment and her undeniable talent. She was by any objective measure a standout. Lily Morgan, by contrast, while certainly not without some natural athletic ability, appeared less focused, less driven. Her effort during the conditioning drills seemed somewhat lackluster, her attention occasionally wandering. In the scrimmages, she made several unforced errors, a few ill-advised shots, and her defensive efforts were at times noticeably half-hearted. Yet Coach Miller's interactions with her remained conspicuously encouraging. His criticisms muted his praise for her occasional decent plays, disproportionately effusive. The subtle yet persistent undercurrent of favoritism I had noticed before seemed, if anything, even more pronounced during the high-stakes pressure of the official tryouts. The final day of tryouts concluded with an exhausting, full-court scrimmage. Emma played with a controlled fury, leaving everything she had on the floor. She scored several key baskets, made a crucial steal in the final minutes, and played with a poise and maturity that belied her sophomore status. As the final buzzer sounded, she walked off the court drenched in sweat, gasping for breath, but with a quiet, hopeful smile playing on her lips. She had done her absolute best. She had left no doubt in anyone's mind, or so we thought about her abilities, her readiness for the varsity level. The agonizing wait for the results began. The official team list was scheduled to be posted on the main athletics department notice board the following afternoon after school. That 24-hour period was one of the longest, most nerve-wracking of Emma's young life, and I confess of mine as well. We tried to distract ourselves to remain optimistic, but the unspoken question, the fervent hope, hung heavy in the air between us. The next day, as the final school bell rang, Emma, her heart pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs, her palms sweating, walked with a determined yet visibly trembling gait towards the athletics department notice board. I had arranged to meet her there, my own stomach a tight knot of maternal anxiety. A small crowd of other hopeful athletes and their friends had already gathered, a hushed, expectant murmur rippling through the corridor. The list, a single sheet of stark white paper bearing the official Northwood High crest, was there, tacked neatly beneath the glass. Emma pushed her way gently through the throng, her eyes scanning the typed names with a desperate, hopeful intensity. My own gaze followed hers, searching, praying. And then the world seemed to stop. Her name, Emma Sanchez. It wasn't there. Confused, disbelieving, Emma's eyes darted back to the top of the list, then slowly, painstakingly scanned each name again, and then a third time, as if willing her own name to magically appear through sheer force of will. But it remained stubbornly, cruelly absent. My own heart plummeted, a leaden weight of shock and disbelief settling in my chest. How could this be possible? And then adding a fresh, stinging layer of incredulity to our shared devastation, we saw it. Lily Morgan's name, not just on the list, but listed prominently among the first few names designated as a starting guard. Lily Morgan, the girl whose performance had been by any objective measure significantly, demonstrably inferior to Emma's. The color drained from Emma's face. Her shoulders, moments before held high with nervous anticipation, slumped in utter devastating defeat. A small, choked sob escaped her lips. She couldn't understand it. She had worked harder, played better, wanted it more than almost anyone else there. Why? Why hadn't she made the team? The unfairness of it, the sheer inexplicable injustice was a crushing physical blow. Maybe it's just a mistake, Mom, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a dawning, heartbreaking despair, searching mine for some explanation, some reassurance that this wasn't real. But deep down in the pit of my own stomach, a cold, sickening certainty was beginning to form. This was no mistake. This felt deliberate. This felt wrong. The days that followed the devastating announcement of the varsity team roster were some of the hardest I had ever witnessed Emma endure. The bright, effervescent spark that usually animated her seemed to have been extinguished, replaced by a heavy, suffocating cloak of disappointment, confusion, and a profound, aching sense of injustice. My usually communicative, vibrant daughter became quiet, withdrawn. Her laughter silenced her interactions with me, and even with her closest friends, strained and minimal. She would spend hours alone in her room, the rhythmic thud of her basketball against the driveway once a constant, joyful sound, now conspicuously painfully absent. She picked at her food, her appetite gone. Sleep offered little respite. Her nights, often troubled her mornings, met with a weary, listless reluctance to face the day, to face the sympathetic or perhaps pitying glances of her classmates. I tried with all the maternal tenderness and patience I could muster to draw her out, to encourage her to talk about her feelings. But her pain was a raw, open wound, and she seemed determined to shield it even from me. When I gently probed, asking if she understood why she hadn't been selected, if the coaches had offered any specific feedback, her responses were usually a mumbled, "I guess I just wasn't good enough, Mom," or a heartbreakingly resigned, "It doesn't matter anymore." She would then quickly change the subject or retreat further into the protective shell of her silence, leaving me feeling helpless, frustrated, and increasingly deeply concerned. But I knew my daughter. I knew her fierce competitive spirit, her unwavering dedication, her fundamental resilience. This level of utter despondency, this almost complete abdication of her passion was not Emma. She might be disappointed by a setback, yes. She might be frustrated by a perceived unfairness, but she would usually channel those emotions into a renewed determination, a fiercer resolve to prove her detractors wrong. This was different. This was a deeper, more corrosive hurt. A hurt that seemed to be eating away at her very core, at her belief in herself, at her faith in the fairness of the world. And as a mother, I couldn't just stand by and watch her spirit wither. I couldn't just accept her resigned, heartbreaking pronouncement that she wasn't good enough. I knew with an unshakable conviction that she was good enough, more than good enough, which meant that something else, something beyond a simple objective assessment of skill and performance, had influenced that team selection. My initial shock and disbelief were slowly, inexorably being replaced by a growing, gnawing suspicion, a suspicion that was further fueled by the hushed, often indignant whispers that began to circulate amongst Emma's teammates from her junior league, and even amongst some of the other parents whose daughters had also participated in the varsity tryouts. Several of Emma's closest friends, girls who had played alongside her for years, who knew her talent, her work ethic, her character, were equally baffled and frankly outraged by her exclusion. Olivia, Emma's best friend since kindergarten, a sharp, observant girl with a strong sense of justice, pulled me aside after school one afternoon, her usually cheerful face clouded with concern. "Mrs. Sanchez," she began, her voice low, hesitant. I don't want to make things worse for Emma, but something really weird happened during the tryouts. Something that just didn't feel right." "What do you mean, Olivia?" I asked, my heart quickening with a mixture of dread and a strange, almost reluctant anticipation. "Well," Olivia continued, choosing her words carefully, "you know Lily Morgan, right? And how she's like best friends with Coach Miller's daughter and how her dad donates a ton of money to the team." I nodded, my stomach tightening. During the final scrimmage, Lily made like 3 really bad turnovers in a row, and she was barely even trying on defense. Coach Miller didn't say a word to her. He just kind of patted her on the back. But then like 2 minutes later, Emma made one single, slightly off-target pass, and he totally reamed her out right there in front of everyone. He yelled at her about not being a team player and lacking court awareness. It was really unfair, Mrs. Sanchez, and super embarrassing for Emma. A bunch of us noticed it. It felt like he was deliberately trying to find fault with her to make her look bad. Maya, another of Emma's close friends and a talented player in her own right, who to her credit had made the team, albeit as a bench player, corroborated Olivia's account later that week, adding even more disturbing details. "Yeah, Coach Miller was definitely way harder on Emma than on anyone else," Maya confided, her brow furrowed with a troubled frown. "And Lily was saying stuff. Before the tryouts and even during, she was going around telling some of the other girls and even some of the assistant coaches that Emma was arrogant and selfish, that she only cared about her own stats and wasn't a true team player, which is like so not true. Emma is one of the most supportive teammates I know, but Lily can be really convincing when she wants to be, and she definitely has Coach Miller wrapped around her little finger." These conversations, these first-hand accounts from girls I trusted, began to paint a deeply unsettling and increasingly clear picture. Emma's exclusion from the team wasn't just a matter of subjective coaching decisions or even a simple oversight. It was beginning to look like a calculated, malicious act of sabotage fueled by Lily Morgan's jealousy and abetted, or at the very least enabled, by Coach Miller's blatant, inexcusable favoritism. The final devastating piece of the puzzle fell into place a few days later during a casual, though now heavily freighted conversation with another parent, a Mrs. Henderson, whose daughter had also narrowly missed out on a varsity spot. Mrs. Henderson, a woman known for her involvement in school politics and her access to the often unfiltered parental grapevine, mentioned with a sigh of resignation, "Well, Carla, between you and me, I'm not entirely surprised about Emma. Or about my Chloe, for that matter. It's a tough cut, but I did overhear something rather illuminating. At the Booster Club meeting last week, apparently Lily Morgan's father made a rather substantial and very timely new anonymous donation to the basketball program just a few days before the tryout results were announced. And he made it quite clear in a private conversation with Coach Miller and the athletic director, or so the rumor goes, that he expected his continued support of the program to be, shall we say, duly recognized and appreciated. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about petty teenage jealousy anymore. This wasn't just about a coach playing favorites with his friend's daughter. This was potentially about something far more insidious, far more corrupt. This was about undue influence, about quid pro quo, about the very integrity of the school's athletic program being compromised. That evening, after Emma was asleep, I sat alone in my darkened living room, the pieces of this ugly, heartbreaking puzzle swirling in my mind. Lily Morgan's jealousy, her manipulative whispers. Coach Miller's blatant favoritism, his harsh, unfair criticism of Emma. And now the deeply suspicious timing of Mr. Morgan's substantial donation. It all coalesced into a single, sickening, and undeniable truth. My daughter, my hardworking, dedicated, and incredibly talented Emma, had been systematically, deliberately, and unjustly cheated out of her rightful place on that team. The initial wave of profound sadness I had felt for Emma's disappointment now began to transmute into something else entirely, a cold, hard, and utterly unshakable maternal rage. They had not just broken my daughter's heart, they had trampled on her dreams, dismissed her years of relentless effort, and called into question her very worth, all to satisfy a spoiled girl's petty envy and a weak coach's compromised integrity. I would not let this stand. I could not. This wasn't just about a spot on a high school basketball team anymore. This was about fairness. This was about justice. This was about teaching my daughter, and perhaps even myself, that you cannot remain silent in the face of such blatant, corrosive injustice. The fight for Emma's rightful place for her stolen dream was about to begin, and I, her mother, was about to become her fiercest, most relentless, and most formidable advocate. My resolve, once solidified, was absolute. I spent the next few days meticulously, almost obsessively planning my strategy. This wasn't a battle I could win with emotional outbursts or angry accusations, however justified those feelings might be. No, if I was going to successfully challenge a popular coach, a well-connected family like the Morgans, and potentially an entire school administration that might be inclined to protect its own reputation above all else, I needed more than just righteous indignation. I needed facts. I needed evidence. I needed a carefully constructed, irrefutable case. My first step was to have a long, honest, and deeply empowering conversation with Emma. I sat her down gently but firmly, laid out all the information I had gathered, the observations from her friends, the rumors about Mr. Morgan's donation, my own profound conviction that she had been treated unfairly. I watched as her initial heartbreaking resignation slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to transform into a flicker of indignant anger, then a spark of her old familiar fighting spirit. You really think they cheated me, Mom?" she asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and a dawning fragile hope. "I don't just think it, Emma," I replied, my gaze steady, unwavering. "I know it. And more importantly, you know it deep down. You know how hard you worked. You know how well you played, and you know in your heart that you deserve to be on that team. The question now is, are we going to let them get away with it?" A new light ignited in her eyes, a spark of the fierce competitor I knew her to be. "No, Mom," she said, her voice gaining strength, her chin lifting with a newfound resolve. "No, we're not. That was all the confirmation I needed. We were in this together." My next step was to systematically and very discreetly gather more concrete evidence. I encouraged Emma to talk to Olivia, Maya, and any other teammates or tryout participants who had witnessed Coach Miller's biased behavior or Lily Morgan's manipulative tactics, and to ask them if they would be willing to provide written signed statements detailing their observations. Many of them, emboldened by Emma's courage and my determination, readily agreed. Their individual accounts, when pieced together, painted a consistent, damning picture of favoritism, unfair treatment, and a selection process that was clearly, demonstrably flawed. I also, with the help of another tech-savvy parent who had a child on the junior varsity team and shared my concerns about Coach Miller's methods, managed to obtain a discreetly recorded video of the final varsity tryout scrimmage. Watching it again this time with a cold, analytical eye, the bias was even more apparent. Emma's skillful plays, her smart decisions, her relentless hustle were often met with stony silence or perfunctory nods from Coach Miller. Lily's frequent mistakes, her lackluster efforts were either ignored or quickly glossed over with encouraging, almost paternal platitudes. The video, I knew, would be a powerful, objective piece of evidence. Armed with this growing arsenal of witness statements and the video footage, I then formally requested in writing a meeting with Coach Miller, the school's athletic director, Mr. Henderson, a man known for his by-the-book approach, and the school principal, Ms. Albright, a woman with a reputation for being tough but fair. I made it clear in my letter that I had serious documented concerns about the integrity and fairness of the recent varsity basketball team selection process, and that I expected these concerns to be addressed with the utmost seriousness. The initial meeting, when it was finally somewhat reluctantly granted a week later, was tense, almost adversarial. Coach Miller, flanked by a clearly uncomfortable Mr. Henderson and a watchful Ms. Albright, was immediately defensive, almost hostile. He dismissed my concerns as those of a typical overzealous disappointed parent who couldn't accept that her child simply wasn't good enough. He insisted that his selections were based purely on skill team dynamics and overall coachability, and that Emma, while a decent player, simply didn't possess the intangibles he was looking for in a varsity athlete. He scoffed at the notion of favoritism towards Lily Morgan, calling it an insulting and unfounded accusation. But I was prepared for his bluster, for his denials. I remained calm, composed, and relentlessly focused on the facts. I presented the signed witness statements from Emma's peers detailing specific instances of his biased treatment. I offered to show them the video footage of the tryout scrimmage, inviting them to compare Emma's performance objectively with Lily's. I respectfully but firmly pointed out the glaring inconsistencies between his stated selection criteria and the actual outcomes. Coach Miller, Mr. Henderson, Ms. Albright. I stated my voice even but unyielding. I am not here to argue about my daughter's intangibles. I am here to talk about tangible evidence of a flawed, unfair, and potentially compromised selection process. Emma Sanchez worked harder, played better, and demonstrated more commitment than many of the girls who were selected for that team, including, with all due respect, Lily Morgan. And I have a room full of witnesses and objective video evidence to support that assertion. All we are asking for is a fair, transparent review of this process, and for Emma to be given the genuine, unbiased consideration she so clearly earned and so clearly deserves. The atmosphere in the room grew even more charged. Coach Miller's face flushed a dangerous shade of red. Mr. Henderson looked increasingly uneasy. But Ms. Albright, the principal, a woman whose expression had remained largely unreadable throughout the meeting, finally spoke, her voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight of authority. "Mrs. Sanchez," she said, her gaze direct appraising, "I appreciate you bringing these serious concerns to our attention in such a thorough manner. The integrity of our athletic programs is of paramount importance to Northwood High. We will therefore be initiating an immediate and comprehensive internal review of the varsity basketball team selection process. We will examine all the materials you have provided, we will speak with all relevant parties, and we will ensure that a just and equitable resolution is reached. You have my word on that. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start, a significant start. The school was no longer dismissing my concerns. They were being forced to investigate them. The fight for Emma's dream was far from over, but for the first time since that devastating list had been posted, I felt a flicker of genuine, tenacious hope. The truth, I believed, was a powerful ally, and I was determined to see it prevail. The weeks that followed Principal Albright's assurance of a comprehensive internal review were a masterclass in institutional inertia and bureaucratic obfuscation. The initial flicker of hope I had felt began to wane, replaced by a growing frustration, a gnawing anxiety that the school was merely going through the motions, engaging in a protracted delaying tactic, hoping that I, the overzealous parent, would eventually tire, lose steam, and quietly give up. Coach Miller, though ostensibly under review, continued to coach the newly selected varsity team, a daily visible reminder to Emma of the injustice she had suffered. Lily Morgan, her spot on the team secure, paraded through the school hallways with an air of smug, untouchable triumph, occasionally casting pitying or perhaps even mocking glances in Emma's direction. The promised immediate and comprehensive review seemed to stretch on indefinitely with no clear timeline, no transparent process, and certainly no communication forthcoming from the school administration. My polite, then increasingly insistent emails and phone calls to Principal Albright's office for an update were met with vague, non-committal responses from her secretary, assurances that the matter was still under active consideration and that I would be notified in due course. It became agonizingly clear that if I wanted genuine justice for Emma, if I wanted more than just a token internal investigation designed to placate and ultimately dismiss my concerns, I would have to escalate the fight to take it beyond the insular, self-protective walls of Northwood High. My first step was to consolidate and formalize the evidence we had gathered. I worked with Emma to meticulously document every detail, every witness account, every instance of biased behavior. We transcribed the relevant portions of the tryout video, creating a clear, irrefutable side-by-side comparison of Emma's and Lily's performances, highlighting Coach Miller's disparate reactions and coaching interventions. We gathered academic records, character references from previous coaches and teachers, anything that could further substantiate Emma's dedication, her skill, and her exemplary character. Then, armed with this significantly more robust and professionally presented dossier of evidence, I made two crucial decisions. First, I retained the services of a highly respected local lawyer, a woman named Ms. Patricia Holloway, no relation to the lawyer from a previous tale, but equally formidable in her own right, who had a strong track record in education law and civil rights cases. Ms. Holloway, after reviewing our evidence, was not just sympathetic. She was professionally outraged, agreeing that we had a very strong prima facie case of unfair treatment, potentially even discriminatory practice given the underlying financial contributions of Lily Morgan's father. Second, with Emma's brave, albeit reluctant consent, we decided to take our story not to the sensationalist media, but to a more targeted and potentially more impactful forum, the Northwood Unified School District Board of Trustees. Ms. Holloway drafted a formal, comprehensive, and legally unassailable letter of complaint outlining our evidence detailing the school's inadequate response to date and formally requesting an independent district-level investigation into Coach Miller's conduct, the flawed selection process, and the potential for undue parental influence within the athletics program. We also, as a preventative measure, requested that Emma be granted an immediate, fair, and independently adjudicated reassessment of her basketball skills for a varsity position, or at the very least that her eligibility for the team be preserved pending the outcome of the district's investigation. The letter sent via registered mail to every member of the school board and to the district superintendent landed like a bombshell. The school district, unlike the individual school administration, could not so easily dismiss or ignore such a well-documented, legally backed formal complaint, especially one that hinted at potential financial impropriety and systemic failures. The pressure now coming from a higher, more authoritative level made the local school administration reconsider its dilatory stance with a newfound, almost comical alacrity. Within days of the school board receiving our letter, Principal Albright herself called me, her tone noticeably more conciliatory, almost apologetic. She informed me that the district had indeed mandated a full independent review to be conducted by an external investigator, and that in the interim, Coach Miller had been strongly advised to reconsider Emma's case, and perhaps to offer her an immediate supplementary tryout to be judged by a panel that included not just himself, but also the athletic director and an independent, respected basketball coach from a neighboring school district. It wasn't the outright admission of wrongdoing I had hoped for, not yet, but it was a significant concession, a clear indication that our relentless pressure, our refusal to back down, was finally yielding results. The battle was far from over, but the tide at long last seemed to be turning in our favor. Emma, who had been understandably despondent, her passion for the game almost extinguished by the perceived hopelessness of our fight, felt a renewed surge of determination. She picked up her basketball again, heading to the driveway court with a fierce, focused intensity I hadn't seen in weeks. She was going to be ready for that supplementary tryout if and when it materialized. And I, her mother, her advocate, would be right there beside her, ensuring it was this time a truly fair fight. The supplementary tryout, as Principal Albright had termed it, was scheduled for the following week, a hastily arranged, somewhat awkward affair held in the cavernous, echoing Northwood High gymnasium after regular school hours. The atmosphere was palpably different from the initial chaotic varsity tryouts. Present were not just Coach Miller, whose usual bluster seemed to have been replaced by a strained, almost sullen civility, but also Mr. Henderson, the athletic director, looking distinctly uncomfortable, and the promised independent adjudicator, a respected, no-nonsense veteran girls basketball coach from a rival high school, a woman named Coach Ramirez, whose reputation for fairness and keen judgment was well known throughout the league. Several members of the newly selected varsity team, including a visibly resentful Lily Morgan, were also present ostensibly to participate in drills and a short scrimmage, but more likely, I suspected, to observe and perhaps to intimidate. Emma, however, was not to be intimidated. The weeks of uncertainty of fighting for her dream had forged a new steely resolve within her. She walked onto that court not with the nervous apprehension of a hopeful supplicant, but with the quiet, focused confidence of an athlete who knew her worth, who knew she belonged. She moved through the drills with a fluid grace, her passes crisp, her shots accurate, her defensive intensity unwavering. In the short scrimmage that followed, playing against some of the very girls who had just weeks before been selected over her, Emma shone. She dominated her matchups, scored several impressive acrobatic baskets, made crucial assists, and demonstrated a level of court awareness and leadership that was impossible to ignore. She played not with anger or a desire for revenge, but with a pure, unadulterated love for the game, a joyous expression of her undeniable talent. Coach Ramirez, the independent adjudicator, watched Emma's performance with a keen, appraising eye. Her expression thoughtful, unreadable. Coach Miller, by contrast, seemed to almost deliberately avoid making eye contact with Emma, his instructions to the other players perfunctory, his usual sideline theatrics conspicuously absent. Lily Morgan, playing opposite Emma, seemed flustered, making several unforced errors, her frustration visibly mounting as Emma consistently outplayed her. At the conclusion of the hour-long session, Coach Ramirez conferred quietly with Mr. Henderson and a subdued Coach Miller for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Mr. Henderson cleared his throat and with a formal, slightly strained announcement informed us that the adjudication panel had reached a unanimous decision. Based on her exceptional performance this afternoon and a comprehensive reevaluation of her original tryout, Mr. Henderson stated his gaze briefly and somewhat apologetically, meeting mine. The panel has determined that Emma Sanchez has unequivocally demonstrated the skill, dedication, and team-oriented attitude required for a position on the Northwood High varsity basketball team. Effective immediately, Emma is invited to join the team. Coach Miller will be in touch regarding practice schedules and team protocols. A wave of elation so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. Emma standing beside me, her face flushed, her chest heaving from exertion, broke into a radiant, tearful smile, a smile that lit up the entire gymnasium. She had done it. Against all odds, against favoritism, against manipulation, against a system that had tried to unfairly exclude her, she had earned her rightful place. Emma's victory, however, wasn't just about securing a coveted spot on the varsity team. It was about something far deeper, far more significant. It was about reclaiming her dignity, her confidence, her unshakable belief in herself and in the fundamental principles of fairness and justice. She had faced down an unjust system, fought courageously for what was right, and had, through her talent and her mother's unwavering advocacy, ultimately, resoundingly won. The fallout from the Emma Sanchez affair, as it came to be quietly known within the school's athletic department, was significant, if not entirely public. Coach Miller, though not formally dismissed, found his authority and reputation severely diminished. He was by all accounts placed on a very short leash by Principal Albright and the athletic director, his every coaching decision, his every team selection, now subject to a new level of scrutiny and oversight. He issued a grudging formal apology to Emma and to me, acknowledging that his initial assessment had been incomplete and that Emma's performance had always been of a varsity caliber. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt admission of bias, but it was an acknowledgement of error, a small victory in itself. Lily Morgan, her privileged position no longer quite so secure, had to contend with being just another player on the team, earning her minutes through genuine effort rather than through parental influence. Her on-court attitude, I heard from Emma, improved noticeably. The entire ordeal, it seemed, had served as a much-needed, if unwelcome, lesson in humility and fair play for her as well. More importantly, Northwood High, spurred by our formal complaint and the undeniable evidence of systemic flaws, instituted a comprehensive review and subsequent overhaul of its entire athletic team selection process, implementing clearer, more objective criteria, establishing independent oversight committees for tryouts, and creating a more transparent and accessible grievance procedure for students and parents who felt they had been treated unfairly. Our fight had, in a small but meaningful way, contributed to creating a fairer, more equitable environment for all student-athletes at the school. In the end, Emma's journey wasn't just about basketball. It was about the courage to stand up for oneself, the resilience to persevere in the face of adversity, the importance of demanding fairness, and the profound enduring power of a mother's unwavering love and advocacy. She learned that sometimes life isn't fair, that systems can be flawed, that people can be unjust. But she also learned that one person armed with truth and determination can make a difference, can challenge injustice, can in fact change the game. And that, I knew, was a lesson of victory far more valuable, far more lasting than any championship trophy could ever be. As I watched her confidently dribble down the court in her new Northwood High varsity uniform, her face alight with the pure, unadulterated joy of the game she loved, I knew with a mother's profound and grateful certainty that this was not just an ending, but a magnificent, hard-won new beginning.